When authorities pulled the body of a Baylor basketball player from a remote gravel pit, they expected merely a homicide. What was uncovered instead was a conspiracy. The discovery ignited an investigation that exposed a sweeping web of lies and corruption in Southern Baptist country. All right, we ready to get into
Let's do this.
this tragic case
Not too far from here.
in Waco in 2003. We are talking, of course, about the world's largest Baptist university and the period of dread that it suffered the first time, because we know Baylor has, since 2003, has undergone another terrible scandal. But it probably wasn't as bad as this one. The Art Briles and the
I don't know. They're both pretty bad.
Yeah, they're both pretty
They're
heinous.
both bad.
They're both pretty terrible.
They're both bad. But in 2003, the nearby Brazos was overfilling with the filth of the most vile sins of mankind. And instead of molding ambassadors of the Christian Messiah, the 100 and I don't know how old it is now, 180-year-old, 185-year-old institution was devoid in many ways of the gospel of Christ. What happened there was indeed the worst possible scenario. Before the Penn State scandal emerged, before the second Baylor scandal, there was this Baylor scandal. It's now been 22 years since the school's lowest moment, perhaps the most notorious moment in all of college athletics of all time, even to this day. A basketball player was shot dead, execution style, by a former teammate and left to decompose in a gravel pit for more than a month before he was found. The story was everywhere nationwide, coast to coast, on every national network. Their coach, we'll learn about him in a little bit, even as he attended the funeral in California of his deceased player, was scheming to keep hidden a deep secret that would end his career. There simply was no dignity in life or death, no angels, only sinners. There were no believers, only doubters. As the good book of Ephesians instructs, put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. The New Testament describes 6 dreams of Joseph. You're aware of Joseph, the mother of Mary, the mother of God. Each communicated knowledge, instruction, and warnings. The ultimate message, do not be afraid. Now, who knows if Abar Rouse's dream, a nightmare, was divinely inspired or merely the result of his circumstances? But through them, he resolved to do what was right, to do so knowing that his career and livelihood would be in peril. I spoke to Rouse several years ago. Abar Rouse. He's a fantastic individual. And he told me I had a nightmare while this was going on. He was then just in the first few months as coach at Baylor. And that nightmare, he said, was clarified everything for me. He said, I don't have nightmares, but here's Patrick and Carlton showing up in my dreams. What became known as the Baylor basketball scandal took on 3 angles. A player was murdered. A coach tried to bury the truth behind a slander. and a young assistant, Abar Rouse, was placed in an impossible situation, and he chose truth over his career. In the end, the scandal didn't hinge on the murderer's instability or the NCAA's punishments that followed, or the layers of institutional failure. It hinged on one man pressing the record button because he understood something no rule book needed to tell him. You don't lie about a murdered kid. You don't let a grieving family watch their son's name be dragged into the mud. And you don't trade integrity for a win-loss record. Our society tends to focus on the sensational, the killing, the cover-up, the courtroom. But the real heart of the Baylor scandal lies in a quieter moment. It's a 28-year-old coach sitting at home, alone, and in his car, holding a small recorder, knowing that he was about to cross the point of no return. He could protect his job, or he could protect the truth. He chose the truth, and it cost him everything.
During the summer of 1856, the annual Union Baptist Association was presented a report on the status of the fledgling Baylor University, then just a little more than 10 years old after its charter in 1845. As quoted, the professors and teachers continue to command the public confidence in a very high degree, with healthy tone of moral feeling that has pervaded the entire institution. That was written by one of the founders in the early days. It was a reputation that only grew as generations passed and was no doubt a big reason why Patrick Dennehy and his parents decided Baylor was the place to continue a promising career with NBA prospects. Dennehy had transferred from New Mexico and set out the 2002-2003 season under the NCAA transfer rules.
Those have changed.
Yeah, that's a lot different now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Carlton Dotson, too, had wondered a bit to start his college career. It's a typical journey for many. After his senior year at North Dorchester High School in Hurlock, Maryland, Dotson played a season at Buffalo before transferring to Paris Junior College in Texas. The 2002-2003 season marked his first at Baylor. He was a junior forward. His experience as a junior transfer was typical too. Learning a new system takes time. He was at times frustrated while averaging 4.4 points in 28 games. Quote, "He was competitive and he played hard," said Tommy Swanson, a former star at North Crowley who was a freshman in 2002-2003, but in the same recruiting class as transfers Dotson and Dennehy. Just like the rest of us, he wanted the team to do well. Patrick as well. We were stacked with talent. Said Matt Saman, who played at Baylor from 2000 to 2004 and wrote a book about the episode titled The Leftovers. Quote, "Patrick was an unbelievable talent, and we all saw that when he came on board, he would help us. They were both great. I really enjoyed playing with Dottie."
So in 2002-2003, the Bears were going to be pretty stacked, returning a number of key players to a team that the year before went 14-14. Average, but they got better as the year went on. In addition to Dennehy becoming eligible, junior college transfer Harvey Thomas gave Baylor its best hopes for an NCAA tournament berth since last making the tournament in 1988. And, of course, the tournament is the promised land for Division I basketball teams. Dennehy and Dotson were buddies, even sharing an apartment for a time. A person who was close to the program told me at the time that a relative of Dotson's had alerted a coach about the player's mental stability. Dotson appeared delusional at times, saying he heard voices. Soon after that, Dennehy reported that he felt threatened, said this source, though he was vague about specifics of the perceived danger. Whatever it was, both Dennehy and Dotson bought guns out of fear for their safety. Said Tommy Swanson, our guy from North Crowley, "With every team, you have different personalities. You're not going to click with everyone. I had a working relationship with everyone. Tommy Swanson also told me that never did he feel unsafe at Baylor. So in the week of June 16, 2003, Dennehy vanished. 3 days later, his stepfather filed a missing persons report with the Waco police. Said Tommy Swanson, quote, "We were bewildered not knowing what happened. Teammates and I were learning everything as things were reported on the news. We were kept in the dark as much as anyone else."
Dennehy's whereabouts were anybody's guess. Some teammates figured that he, like many college students, extended a weekend trip. They were said to have been payments made to Dennehy's AAU coach, a common back alley corruption in the college game, certainly back then, and some that weren't made. Some coaches feared the AAU coach had stashed him away, literally holding him hostage until another payment was issued. The worst fears were beginning to take root, however, when Dennehy's 1996 Chevrolet Tahoe was found without a license plate in a strip mall parking lot in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Searches for any sign of him proved fruitless. A gun was found outside of the apartment of Harvey Thomas, the player who allegedly made the threats against Dennehy, though police cleared Thomas of any suspicion. Quote, "Nobody knew," Rouse said. "I'm following the lead of the other coaches who had been there. As soon as that missing persons report was filed by his parents, it obviously took on a greater importance. It was clear that something was amiss."
Let's discuss some things here from the perspective of a retired police sergeant. Now, keep in mind, never were a homicide investigator, but so let's say when you hear that a college athlete has been reported missing, what typically would be the first investigative steps that law enforcement might take?
Well, it's different now than then, right? Technology's advanced at a crazy level compared to 2003. Obviously first you're gonna talk to as many people as you possibly can to see, is there something afoul? I think, like they mentioned,
You're going to talk to all the players.
coaches, friends, the list goes on to see, right? That's back then. Now, obviously you got social media pages you can look at. You've got text messages between, the players, friends, etc.
Well, and they found his car in Virginia, right? So almost certainly there was probably a camera wherever that car was left on a street.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. That brings up that's entirely different now.
All right, well, go ahead.
There's a lot more value.
Sorry for blowing up.
No, you're fine. Would you like to think that it's just like any other missing person? Yeah. Is it? No. He's a D1 college basketball player,
right,
at a huge school.
So there's going to be news coverage of this.
There's going to be news coverage.
Immediately.
Frankly, there's probably going to be, more resources invested into finding it, because what happens, obviously, no city wants bad coverage. This is going to get national coverage almost immediately, much like it did.
So there's a kind of a political angle
there's
to it.
going to be a political spin to it, for sure. So, like I said, back then, what are you doing? Really, back then, it was a sit and wait game, right? Like I said, technology is not where it is at now. You're putting out bulletins, if you will.
Social media. There was no real social media then at all.
Social media back then. There's really no way to, outside of news coverage, there's no way to really get the story out there. So really, it's kind of a sit and wait game. You're waiting for the body, dead or alive.
And it's also like 3 days. Wait, 3 days since since he was last seen. So, like I said, there were some speculation that maybe an AAU coach was hiding him away, waiting for a payment from the basketball program or someone affiliated with the basketball program, which is a common occurrence, or certainly back then. Those rules have changed too now that players can actually.
It's a wild twist though to kidnap somebody awaiting a payment.
Yeah, just kind of saying, stay at the house for a couple days and see what happens.
Yeah, I suppose so.
But anyway, that was a possibility. So the vehicle turns up across the country. I don't know how many miles that is, thousands of miles, to 1,500 miles away at least. The vehicle turns up with no license plates. So from your investigator's perspective, what does that discovery suggest? Panic planning, both?
I mean,
Who's from there? Would be the one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's the why there, right? Like, I mean, there's a whole slew of things that are going to go into why was it found there. You're trying to put that story together. But again, now you take a car from Waco, Texas to Virginia Beach, Virginia. You're going to be captured on license plate readers, hundreds, if not thousands of them in that commute.
Yeah.
Right? So they're going to know, like, the difference now. So if Dad reports it January 19th, one of the first things they're going to do, the company that the biggest one is Flock, right? They're the ones that have most of the license plate recognition cameras. They're immediately, that's going to be, that's probably the first resource that the police check. And they're going to know within moments, minutes, maybe hours of Dad reporting him missing. Okay, it hit on I-35 in Hillsboro. It hit, just trying to take a path. It hit somewhere in Arkansas. It hit somewhere in Tennessee, over and over and over. And you're going to have time-stamped images of the license plate of the vehicle. So at that point, they're going to know. They're going to have a really good trail of when the car left Waco and when it got to Virginia.
So talk about that, the Flock and the cameras and everything else. How are those? It catches an image. How does the Waco police get that picture, that information of where it is? Are they read
own database?
They're read, so they just go to a database and see,
yeah.
put a license plate in, and they can tell where it was.
It's going to pull up, like I said, an image of the license plate and an image of the vehicle.
So they also, these threats that the guys claim they were getting, Dennehy and Dotson both said that they felt unsafe. That they might need to feel unsafe. Let's put it that way. That they believe they might have been in danger. So how would investigators corroborate threats of that kind?
I mean, I think that's hard because it's just those two reporting it, right? I mean, how many's on a D1 NCAA basketball roster? How many players? 15?
Yeah,
somewhere around there,
15,
right?
Walk on, something like that.
I mean, why just those two? You would think that if there was something.
Yeah, and Tommy Swanson said he didn't have the same feelings of being unsafe.
And none of the other players really said, hey, these guys are constantly complaining about this, right?
Nope.
So, I don't know. I mean, that one's a little, that's kind of post-crime, if you will, that story coming out. Some a little bit suspect of the validity of that. No, I'm not saying, it didn't happen or whatever, but again, why those two? And why were they not talking about it a lot?
Now you yourself had sources within neighborhoods and communities, stuff like that. You might possibly talk to them, but hey, do you know anything about Baylor basketball at all?
Well, I mean, if there was a tie to them, for sure. I mean, that's the that's the value of informants, right?
Right.
I mean, if it's in a certain neighborhood, hey, what's going on? And typically, the good informants are going to know the twists and turns and what everyone's doing and what all the rumors are and what's fact, what's fiction. It'd be hard in a college basketball program because it's not really ripe for having an informant, right? Like, I mean, there's not much criminal behavior attached to that environment.
Typically. But, say narcotics, because drugs are always somewhere in the thought of a situation even like this, right? And if you had a sergeant in narcotics, for example, and you were on this investigation, would that detective might come to the sergeant in narcotics and say, hey, ask around your source, your information.
Yeah, I mean, if there was
see if there's any tie at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was some information pointing them to that particular sect or crime or involvement in the dope world, then I mean, we would definitely ask around then. But again, I mean, it's rare. I mean, we're not talking about run-of-the-mill people. Let's face it, right? I mean, they've excelled at a level. They're playing a sport at a D1 college. You know, frankly, I mean, their lifestyle is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Do we have environments where, you know, we had one here a few years ago. It was, I don't remember the school they were at, but they were involved in a murder, and I don't even know if they were D1 athletes. They were football players. They shot and killed someone over at that apartment in East Fort Worth. You know, we've had the scandal at our...
Sounds like another case we need to dig into. I don't remember that one.
Yeah, it was a few years ago.
All right.
You know, they had the drug scandal at the very own D1 institution right here in Fort Worth.
Yeah. Were you around for that one, Ashley?
Yeah, there was a couple soccer players that got tied up in it.
Yeah, that would have been definitely
wild
her
story.
wheelhouse or time, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, like I said, these are not normal run-of-the-mill kids. I did not play a D1 sport. Okay,
It wasn't for lack of wanting to.
or lack of confidence.
Right.
But I would think that their semester, their school year as a whole is so structured, it would be hard to be tied up into something, into like entirely consumed by some seedy underworld, right? I mean, you have practice. I mean, there's a D1 athlete sitting at the end of the table.
Exactly.
Right? I mean-
exactly. They certainly aren't dealing stuff. They, you know, at the very least, they might be, you know,
Wait, they were totally dealing at TCU though,
allegedly.
allegedly.
Oh, there's that whole thing. I mean,
I was actually, so not to get off topic, but I was there and like we were all at practice, didn't know what was going on. We were missing 4 players and we were like, where are they? Because we don't miss practice. It was bad.
So that was pre-NIL, so they needed spending money.
Yes.
we'll get into that in a little as this story
Getting paid under
plays
the
out.
table did not happen for some people.
Yeah,
We'll there's
We'll get
definitely
into
a topic for later conversation as this story advances.
No, but again, going back to verifying the threats, I mean, these are going to be hard threats to verify in most cases, right? I mean, especially in 2003. Because, frankly, like I said, if they hadn't been talking about it, if it's just them two, you know, are they going to interview the rest of the team? Yes.
Yeah.
But if Dennehy and Dotson never shared any of these concerns with any of the rest of the team, which if they were true, they would have, I'm quite certain of that, they're going to be hard to verify. Now, but again, maybe they did share them, and maybe they were verified. I don't know.
Anyway, there was no good outcome here. A break in the case occurred when an informant in Delaware told law enforcement authorities that Carlton Dotson, who returned home to Maryland, told a relative that he had shot Dennehy during an argument while the two were shooting guns. On July 21st, Dotson was arrested in Maryland and charged with his teammate's murder. On July 25th of 2003, 5 weeks after he went missing, Dennehy's body was discovered off a road in Waco. He had been shot twice in the head, according to the autopsy report. The Baylor scandal of 2003 involving the murder of Patrick Dennehy, who went missing in March 2003 and was found in July of that year, shot dead, allegedly by a teammate, Carlton Dotson, who told an informant in Delaware that he had indeed pulled the trigger after an argument with Patrick Dennehy. So where does that take us in episode 5? I'm going to tell you about a really fantastic human being. His name is Abar Rouse. And when I was with Star Telegram, this must have been in 2013, they called me up and said, hey, we want you to do the 10-year anniversary story on this case. And we'll get into the details of that. But it was through that assignment that I met Abar Rouse. who joined the Baylor. He was a basketball coach with some aspirations. He wanted to, like any young basketball coach, wanted to climb through the ranks and make a career, get a good job at a good school, and make a career out of this. And he got that opportunity, so he thought. At Baylor in 2003, I believe he'd been on the job. I believe he got the job in June. So right in the middle of this, Patrick Dennehy was still missing. They didn't know where he was, what had happened to him, and Abar Rouse gets this job at Baylor in what he thought was a dream job. He had had a series of jobs at small NCAA schools and junior colleges, and this was finally the big time, or at least as close to it. An assistant at a Big 12 conference school, a power conference, and he was also coming home. This was his alma mater. Baylor was. He'd graduated 6 years after he'd graduated 6 years earlier, and in coaching, as I mentioned, you move around a bunch. Ashley, I'm sure you know coaches like that. They move around and finally find the right fit.
Even then, they still move around.
And they still move around. That's right. So after graduating Baylor in 1997, he went to Midwestern State. He went to Sam Houston State. He went to Ranger Junior College. He went to Cape Fear Community College in North Carolina. You ever seen Cape Fear?
Yeah.
Remake? Huh. No? Oh, God.
Not the remake.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
With
in the 80s or 90s?
Yeah, with
Yeah.
with De Niro.
Yeah.
Cape Fear Community College, North Carolina. Southeastern Community College in Iowa. McLennan Community College in McLennan County, Waco. And then ultimately back to Baylor for this job. So since 1997 to 2003, 6 years, he had 6 jobs. But Baylor was a place Abar Rouse could stay for a while and build something, or so he thought. And when a position opened after Dennehy's disappearance, Rouse was hired, primarily because it was, quote, no one wanted the job, with the cloud over the program. And it was hardly the way he envisioned getting his break, but he was going to take it. Rouse's former boss at Midwestern State, a gentleman by the name of Jeff Ray, is quoted as saying, when he got there, he was just extremely excited. You're in the Big 12. It's a fantastic job, especially for a young guy like him. He was 28 at the time. And in a way, it's maybe the dream job. And then all this happens. Ray said, I felt bad for him, and the timing was just awful. Because instead of this feel-good homecoming, returning to Baylor was a trip to the darkest side of college athletics.
So Dave Bliss, the coach.
Dave Bliss was the head coach at the time.
The head coach had cooked up a scheme to protect his ass and his career against what would likely have been a career ender. Patrick Dennehy wasn't on scholarship at Baylor, not yet at least. There are only so many. I think numbers around 15 or so today.
Yeah, I think so.
So what many programs would do is take guys as walk-ons. That is not on scholarship. Dennehy was set to go on scholarship the next season.
Yeah, so they have this agreement that you come and walk on.
Yep.
We'll get you on scholarship next year when we have one available.
Yep. But in the meantime, Dennehy had to find or pay his own way. Or
Tuition.
find someone to do it. As Bliss.
Baylor's not exactly cheap.
No, not at all. So this may have changed, but then it's against NCAA rules. As it's against NCAA rules as improper inducements. So Bliss had designed a ruse to explain how Patrick Dennehy was paying his tuition. He was a drug dealer.
What could go wrong?
And Bliss needed his coaches and a handful of players to go along with that story. Quote, "This guy is going to get these kids to say this," Abar Rouse said.
Wait, the story was he's a drug dealer?
The story was he's a drug dealer.
So he wasn't a drug dealer.
He was not a drug dealer.
But he. Oh, wow.
Bliss concocted this whole thing,
To explain how he had enough money to pay for tuition.
and we'll get to that in a second.
That's a weird story
Yep.
for a coach to make up. Interesting.
Quote, "This guy's going to get these kids to say this," Abar Rouse said. And this is not where this ends. There's going to be a murder trial, and they're going to have to testify. And they're going to have to testify to this lie they're telling, Rouse further said. Another quote, "So now this becomes about drugs. They're telling us this kid was shot twice in the head, execution style, and you throw drugs in there? You've just changed the motive for murder. And that could mean the death penalty." He, being Abar Rouse, said he was so uncomfortable about the circumstances surrounding his hire that he couldn't even sit in his new office. Rouse's decision to blow the whistle on Bliss's scheme was motivated by doing right by the player, who could no longer speak for himself, and by doing right by himself, protecting himself legally. And there was precedence. In 1995, a federal jury convicted 3 Baylor assistant basketball coaches of mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy for their roles in helping 5 junior college recruits obtain phony academic credit.
So that's just 8 years prior to this.
That was not that long prior. The jury acquitted Daryl Johnson, then the head coach, of similar charges. In the front of Rouse's mind was being held criminally liable for obstructing justice in the murder case, as well as protecting Dennehy and Dotson's right to a fair trial. Under the Texas Penal Code, merely making a false report to a peace officer is a Class B misdemeanor, punishable by up to 180 days in jail and a maximum of a $2,000 fine.
So that Daryl Johnson scandal was only 8 years prior, and this could have been a whole lot worse.
What's this man's name?
Abar Rouse?
While he was in college, he was at Baylor at that time. If he graduated,
He was at Baylor at the time. Yeah, exactly. So yeah. So Rouse said to me, he says, "I didn't know what happened to what or to who as far as the case of Dennehy and Carlton Dotson, but I did know they were both my responsibility as a coach." Now keep in mind, Abar Rouse has been there not even a month. About a month. And he's thinking about his responsibility to 2 guys he doesn't even really know. He certainly doesn't know Patrick Dennehy because he's no longer with us, but he barely knew Carlton Dotson. He's concerned about his responsibility to those kids as a coach. And he continued to say, I also thought about my school. He's an alum. There were a whole bunch of reasons that went into what he wound up doing, which is taping the conversations that he had with Dave Bliss and Bliss had with other people. Bliss's aim, with what he hoped would be Rouse's cooperation, was to coerce players to tell authorities that Dennehy paid for his tuition by dealing drugs. In fact, Dennehy's tuition was being paid for by members of the Baylor basketball community, a major NCAA violation which, if uncovered, would likely mean the end of Bliss's then 30-year career that began as an assistant under, of all people, Bob Knight at Army. And he followed Knight to Indiana as well. From Indiana, Bliss went on to head coaching positions at Oklahoma, SMU, and New Mexico before taking over at Baylor in 1999. And at each of those places, Oklahoma, but SMU and New Mexico for sure, the NCAA was always on his tail because he was always had allegations of some sort of illegal inducement.
He just couldn't recruit the right way, apparently.
No, but in his defense, he was far from the only guy who was doing that stuff at the time. So the issue of how Dennehy was paying his tuition came to light when his stepfather, Dennehy's stepfather, said he didn't know how he was paying his tuition because he wasn't on scholarship yet. So his stepfather's like, he's not on scholarship yet. So Abar says to me, he says, you're a young professional, and he's talking about himself, and you're looking at how the boss is handling this situation. Abar also said that he was threatened with termination if he didn't go along with it. And you're looking at Bliss for leadership, and this is what he comes up with. Abar said, I'm just a regular guy. I thought it was wrong. And ultimately, I couldn't see myself explaining to my child or my mother. I just couldn't do it. In his book, Matt Saman, another player on that team, said that Bliss pulled him aside as well in the hallway and confronted him with the story. Saman said he was oblivious to Dennehy even being a walk-on. In no way could I ever imagine, Saman said, you know what walk-ons look like, and you know how they play and what their purpose is. It was pretty obvious that they're not that, or that they are that. When you see these guys that are just athletic and huge, like Dennehy, you just don't ever question it. You just assume he's on scholarship. We all just assumed that, at least. Saman was, by that time, disillusioned by the whole experience and not completely surprised to hear what Bliss was saying. That something, he said, just didn't rub me right. Plus, like many his age, he held coaches and those in authority in good esteem. I quote, I had always grown up told to trust your coaches. That's something my parents instilled in me. But it was that same allegiance that Bliss was likely counting on to sell the story to players. He knew he could get away with it. Abar told me, he said, the entire situation took me by surprise. When you're interviewed, they don't ask you if you're a cheater or if I cheat or violate NCAA rules or play a role in changing the facts in a murder. They just don't ask those questions. So Rouse decided to press record and turn whistleblower.
In 3 conversations taped with a hidden microcassette, tapes Rouse ultimately turned over to the NCAA on the last 2 days of July and August 1st, 2003. Bliss suggested that players tell investigators they saw Dennehy with a tray containing drugs and a roll of $100 bills. He also tells players he knows they smoked marijuana and that Dennehy couldn't rebut the story because he was dead. Quote, first of all, nobody is ever going to know about the fact that you might have smoked weed with the guys, Bliss told one player. I think the thing we want to do, and you think about this, if there's a way we can create the perception that Pat may have been a dealer, even if we had to kind of make some things look a little better than they are, that can save us. You don't have to tell me about Dotson because he's still alive. But Dennehy is never going to refute what we say.
Ick.
I've got some things to say about him because he came in and tried to get me to help him with something. And I told him, I can't help you. Now I know that ticked him off, but he knows that's the truth. And now he's dead, so he isn't going to argue with me at all.
So Abar told me, here, I asked him about this, that, quote, I'm a parent. I put my kid's face in Patrick's and Carlton's place and thought, are you kidding me? You came to my house, sat down on my couch, and promised to treat my child like they were your own. Abar continued, he says, you find me a coach that would allow their child to be put in that situation that Patrick's parents found their son in, how would they respond? If any of those guys would sit and tell you that they would be okay with that, with what Coach Bliss was doing, they'd be lying to you.
Bliss resigned after the tapes were disclosed. An investigation conducted by Baylor found that Bliss had paid up to $40,000 in tuition for Dennehy and another player. Officials also found that Bliss lied to investigators about attempts to cover up his conduct and that Baylor coaches failed to report failed drug tests. The NCAA hit Baylor harshly. 5 years probation and the stripping of 5 scholarships over 2 seasons. The Bears were banned from playing non-conference games in 2005-2006 season. In a detailed and often blistering report, the Division I Committee on Infractions formally assessed the scandal, likening the case to the collapse of the SMU's football program nearly 2 decades ago. Committee Chairman Gene Marsh, a University of Alabama law professor, said only Baylor's swift and decisive response after the violation surfaced kept the program from facing the, quote, death penalty. The same punishment that shuttered SMU football for 2 seasons and remains the harshest sanction in NCAA history. Even so, Baylor at the time ranked as the most prominent university directed to eliminate portions of a season because of major infractions. The NCAA allowed the school to choose between dropping its non-conference schedule in either the 05-06 or the 06-07 seasons. Baylor selected the upcoming season. The Bears were eligible for the death penalty because the violations occurred within 5 years of the men's tennis program being placed on probation for major infractions. The tennis program itself had faced that punishment due to violations committed less than 5 years after the basketball team was penalized for widespread academic fraud. So it's just back to back to back there, it seems like.
Yeah, it's certainly there. And in defense of Baylor, a lot of that stuff goes on in a lot of places.
They don't deserve your defense.
Well, okay. Here's our TCU girl over here. She's going to Baylor,
Homer.
Baylor.
We'll have a discussion about this after all of this is done.
So along with the shortened season of 2005-2006, the committee imposed 5 years of probation, but largely upheld the penalties Baylor had already instituted on its own. The Baylor president got swept out of there as well. So the interim president, Bill Underwood, who served on the internal committee that examined the basketball program following this incident, called the NCAA's decision, quote-unquote, the final piece in the university's effort to move beyond events of that year. And he said he believed the sanctions were fully appropriate. What else would he say? The former head coach, talking about Bliss, presided over a staff that exhibited blatant and sweeping disregard for NCAA rules, the committee said. Bliss intentionally committed serious and numerous violations of NCAA legislation and involved members of his staff, student-athletes, and their family members in his misdeeds. To no surprise, Bliss's career as a Division I coach was over. If any school wanted to hire him within the last 10 years of 2013, the institution would have to appear before the NCAA Infractions Committee to discuss it. Nobody was going to deal with any of that stuff. He was persona non grata. Bliss is now 82 years old, or thereabouts. And he, believe it or not, went on. There was a lot of controversy over him, over his next job, which was Dean of Students and Athletics at the Allen Academy in Bryan, Texas. I would love to know what they were thinking. Said Matt Saman, who played on that team, he said this whole thing was tough. He says, I was close with Dave Bliss. I enjoyed playing with him. We spent some time together off the court. And it just goes to show, he went on to say, that if you're not careful and don't keep your heart guarded and allow the pressures of whatever you're doing to take over your judgment, that even good people, and I consider him a good person, he told me in 2013, even good people can make horrific decisions. And Matt Saman said he believed at the time that Bliss was using his experience to help others not make the same mistakes. Who would hire Dave Bliss at all?
I keep thinking of that little kid that says, a bullshit.
Who says that?
There's this little meme, and it's this little girl, and she sits in the back of the car, and she says, a bullshit.
I've seen that actually, yes, and that's exactly.
This is what I keep thinking of.
It's exactly what it is. So Dave Bliss, let's look right quick. So he didn't stay long.
I'm actually looking now. He got, so he goes to Allen Academy, the college prep school in Bryan.
Yeah.
Almost immediately, Bliss became embroiled in controversy. On November 28, 2010, it was reported by multiple news outlets in Bryan that Bliss received a 2-year suspension from coaching basketball and a 1-year suspension from school administration at Allen Academy by TAPS, the Texas Association of Private and Parochial Schools.
I played in TAPS.
Yeah. Are you a TAPS legend?
Nolan Catholic. No, I was not a legend. No. In my own mind.
Yeah, in your own mind. That suspension came less than a month after the start of his first season as head boys basketball coach and less than 3 months after joining the school in an administrative role. They declined to comment. The TAPS director at the time declined to comment, but So I don't know if it was related to that.
I'll wait till we're done summarizing everything before I give y'all my absolute, like, holy stuff. But, like, who would let their children around this man?
I always call them little league parents, but there are parents who are deluded into thinking, their kid's going to be a major sports star, going to get a Division I scholarship to play whatever, and they think that they're of the belief that a guy like Dave Bliss, who has all this network and these connections, can help make that happen.
He tried to help. To me, from what it sounds like, he helped cover up a murder. He should have been in jail.
He certainly could have been, right, because if Abar Rouse had not taped him and he went through with this, he probably absolutely would have faced what's the word I'm looking for? Colluding or covering up evidence. A murder trial.
That veil would have been pulled back real fast, though. There's no way that you could rely on a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds
to do what he wanted to do.
To do what he... I mean, look at Saman as the perfect example.
Yeah. He respected these guys.
It's one thing for Bliss to say, hey, say this. It's another thing for them to actually be sitting in a police interrogation room saying that. I think that would have been uncovered rather quickly.
But that in its own right, tell me if I'm wrong, is illegal.
Isn't that impeding investigation?
Yeah, the impeding investigation is what he was attempting to do. Now, whether Matt Saman or whatever player went in, would have
not necessarily
hypothetically gone into an interview room with a detective and starts telling them this stuff, or perjures himself on the witness stand by saying this stuff.
That's where it gets real. Abar Rouse was probably, he's not far removed from school, age-wise.
Yeah, he's 28. Right.
Obviously, he has a high moral character.
Yeah.
Puts it all on the line and says, hey, I got my dream job, and now I'm about to tank that. But for the right reasons. Like I said, if Abar Rouse didn't come forward, somebody at some point, because again, you're dealing with teenagers. You're dealing with 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds. Some of these kids are not going, there's in my mind, zero chance they're actually going to go through with this whole plan.
I feel like, though, and this goes back to, and we can go back to this in the next episode, but this whole aspect of trust your coach thing
Authority
that you were talking
right?
about.
Yeah.
Like, especially nowadays, I wouldn't tell my kid to trust their coach. I wouldn't.
At all.
No
matter who it was.
No matter who it was. The people, you trust me. Like, you trust me.
Yeah, and God willing, they can, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't tell them to trust their coaches. I mean, look at all the stuff that's going on in Salina and Cedar Hill and Godly and all these ISDs. No way, Jose.
They're all business, though. It's all a business.
Well, and when you're talking about as much money as is involved in the revenue sports of NCAA Division I, there's always going to be some corruption.
I mean, these kids probably thought if they didn't stick along with it or do what they were told, that they weren't going to be allowed to go back to school. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I have no doubt that they were probably.
I mean, so maybe yes, there's probably somebody in there that would have snitched, but you threaten a kid enough, you might not.
Imagine what he didn't get caught for.
Well, that's just it. Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you get caught on your first time.
Right.
Colleges are so corrupt. It's not even funny.
Well, you said that. I didn't say that. But
it's okay. I can't say
it. There is certainly corruption in just so much money involved with it. Did you mention that after his experience at Allen Academy in Bryan, Bliss was hired by Southwestern Christian University in 2015. That's an NAIA school. And he resigned there in 2017. But he did resign from there after the airing of a documentary on Showtime about this whole thing. So he left. And then in 2017, a Las Vegas high school hired him. At least he's closer to where he should be in Las Vegas, right? Sin City is where he should be. But he resigned there in 2018 after 1 year, and he has not worked since. and probably didn't even need to work because I'm sure he could have retired, depending on how many people he was putting through Baylor at the time, I guess. But all right, so let's talk about some of this stuff. When you learn that a coach is trying to steer players toward a false narrative by calling the victim a drug dealer, what went through your mind when you heard all that stuff?
I mean, you're going down unnecessary rabbit holes is what it's ultimately
For the police.
for the investigators. I mean, like I said, at some point, more than likely, that whole scheme that he concocted will collapse or would have collapsed. Somebody is going to snitch. Like we talked about, yes, I think that some of the players, especially if they're on scholarship or, some of them would have gone through with it. But again, when pressed, do they have the skill set to lie to the police? Probably, because we're not dealing with a bunch of seasoned criminals here.
Right.
So I think that whole story would have certainly collapsed. It's kind of ridiculous. Again, I like I said, what did he not get caught for, I guess, at this point? But I mean, to me, I'm hard pressed to think that's going to work. Something's going to come out. So in summary, you're chasing a false narrative that you're going to uncover that this is actually what really happened, and that was the truth.
All right, so let's take it from the angle of, for example, Abar Rouse comes to you as the lead investigator and says, Dave Bliss is pressuring me and players to lie to police about this situation. How do you handle that?
The police are focused on the crime. They're not focused on non-criminal corruption at a college, right?
Would Bliss not be criminally liable for trying to influence and impede an investigation?
I mean, outside of perjuring himself, would be hard-pressed to think that. I mean, people lie, witnesses lie in investigations all the time.
Right.
Right, and they're seldom charged. And I think
But they could be.
Maybe, maybe not. I think it depends on what they are lying about. Because, again, they're not alleging another crime occurred, right? When you look at, like, that false report, you're saying, hey, you're reporting something that you know is not factual to the police that's a specific crime. That's not the case here. Dennehy was dead. Dennehy was already killed. Mm-hmm. They're just trying to create a backstory, right? So, again, people lie all of the time in a myriad of investigations. So do I think that he would have been tried for something? I mean, you'd have to probably get deep down into the penal code to make that fit.
Because the players who lied wouldn't know they were lying, right? They're told this, and
They were told that,
best
yeah,
their
right,
best
right,
of their record,
right.
best of their knowledge. This is the truth.
I mean, again, I don't know that, obviously what he did was wrong. I mean, and I think it certainly fits more into the category of being administratively disciplined, if you will, whether it be from the NCAA or from Baylor by him getting terminated or resigning, whatever. With the facts that we know, I don't know what his charges would be.
Do we still have access to our resident attorney?
Yes.
You
should
have
call that.
have you talked to him about coming on?
No, I need to. He's got a role now to where we're probably going to have to seek a new attorney perspective.
Yeah.
But I want like a defense attorney, outgoing.
I mean, we'll maybe we should get a Ouija board out and try to get the spirit of the ghost of Racehorse Haynes.
No.
Yes.
We don't fuck with a Ouija board.
We can avoid the Ouija board.
Patrick Dennehy's body had been found. Carlton Dotson had been arrested after telling an informant in Delaware that he was the one who pulled the trigger, ending the life of Patrick Dennehy, his basketball teammate at Baylor. We were introduced to a gentleman named Abar Rouse, who was the assistant who blew the whistle on Coach Dave Bliss's scheme of concocting a story to demonstrate how Patrick Dennehy could have paid for his tuition at Baylor. Patrick Dennehy was not yet on scholarship at Baylor. He was what was considered a walk-on. Dave Bliss and other members of the Baylor community were the ones footing that bill at Baylor, which is against the rules of handing out inducements to play at a university. And Dave Bliss concocted a story that Patrick Dennehy was a drug dealer. That's how he was able to afford his tuition at Baylor. A friend to humanity, really, he really is. His name is Abar Rouse, was an assistant, just gotten the job at Baylor a month prior to tape recording Dave Bliss, laying out these plans to assistant coaches and players about how Patrick Dennehy was earning a living. And, of course, it was completely false. At the end of episode 5, we learned that the NCAA handed down harsh penalties to Baylor's basketball program. Dave Bliss, of course, resigned his position. His career as a Division I coach was over. He somehow got a job at Allen Academy in Bryan, and then an NAIA school in Oklahoma, and then finally a high school in Las Vegas in 2017, and he left there in 2018, and he has not worked since. So Carlton Dotson told authorities that initially that the killing was in self-defense. He said he'd been hearing voices. Other associates of Dotson said that he believed he was Jesus Christ, and he was initially declared incompetent to stand trial after the testimony of a psychologist who had examined him. But this case got really interesting, certainly from a media standpoint, when Dotson gave a jailhouse interview in late July 2003 to an intern of the Dallas Morning News named Shani George. And the interview lasted about 10 minutes and offered one of the first public statements from Dotson after his arrest. In the interview, Dotson appeared anxious throughout the conversation, repeatedly glancing over his shoulder and asking whether anyone was standing behind him. So speaking through a plexiglass barrier, he identified himself and acknowledged that the newspaper reporter was indeed a newspaper reporter. There was some controversy about that later. Dotson, when asked about his relationship with Dennehy, said he believed Dennehy had, quote-unquote, betrayed him, but he didn't provide any details. When asked to describe what happened between the two men, Dotson suggested he acted in self-defense. He said, in fact, quote, according to the newspaper reporter, if someone points a gun at you and shoots, as in pulls the trigger, and it doesn't go off, what would you do? He added that Dennehy began, quote, putting more bullets in the gun, repeating the question, what would you do? During the interview, Dotson also claimed to hear voices. He described them saying, we are many, we are strong, we support you, we're behind you, we're at war, a spiritual war. His comments aligned with reports from law enforcement and later courtroom statements questioning his mental stability. Dotson's attorney raised a red flag on this interview, and Dotson's attorney said that the reporter didn't properly identify herself as a reporter. The attorney said at one point that the reporter identified herself as part of a religious group. George, of course, disputed the claim. The reporter disputed the claim and stated that she clearly identified herself as working for the Dallas Morning News. George said she conducted the interview without notes, saying she believed writing instruments or recording devices were prohibited. She said she relayed the conversation immediately to editors following her exit from the jail. That is relevant because, did she have an accurate recording of what he said? But Dotson's statements during the interview were consistent with the erratic behavior described by investigators and contributed to questions at the time regarding his competency to stand trial. So let's look at these claims, Jake. The claim of self-defense. He clearly framed Patrick Dennehy as the aggressor, saying if someone points a gun at you and pulls a trigger, what would you do?
Are you asking me that literally?
No.
Oh.
So he says that Dennehy attempted to shoot him. The gun perhaps misfires or doesn't fire, however, and that Dotson's reaction was out of fear. So as an investigator, is there anything to be done with that allegation of without any evidence? Because there was no evidence that Dotson or that Dennehy ever threatened to fire at him. I guess they did know he did have a gun because I think one was registered to him. And then of course the body was found fired. The body was found. The autopsy showed it was execution style.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely nothing of any relevance to that claim. Do we think that could be a delusional reconstruction or just a flat out lie? Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Either or. I mean, honestly, it could be either.
You ever seen anything like anybody giving you a bullshit story like that about whatever they're...
Yeah. I mean, it's an excuse to justify, whatever their participation in whatever criminal activity it is. I mean, yeah, those are very common.
But of course, you gotta sift through it all, right? Because you can't just assume he's lying. I mean, you can assume he's lying, but you can't assume that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know. Yeah, exactly. You don't know factually if he. I mean, is it possible he was telling the truth? Yes, but again, you look at the totality of the circumstances, how mental instability, I suppose, that Dotson presented. So
we were talking about our informant friend that you knew as an officer, as a detective.
Let's not friend. That's maybe a little bit. I mean,
use that word
speak for yourself.
I use that word sarcastically. How did you deduce, I guess, come to the conclusion that he was giving you baloney stories?
Well, that one, nothing. It got to the point where things did pan out. They were accurate, and then over the course of time, these, kind of like I told you, hey, they've got 10 kilos inside the house, and you get there and there's nothing. And that could it happen once or twice? Yeah, but after a while, and then the amounts, the quantity started getting more and more outrageous. And, nothing, like I said, nothing was panning out. I mean, but, with all of these, when Dotson's talking about, we are many, we are strong, we support you, etc., right? I mean, those kind of interactions are fairly frequent with police. I mean, I got them more, of all places, when I worked in internal affairs, where people would call and say, hey, the helicopters are following me, they're listening to my phone call. I mean, and those were weekly. You would get those calls, like complaining to the police that the police are spying on these people, right? Or spying on the caller, which is outrageous, right?
They're hallucinations.
Yeah, exactly. So it's frequent.
Dotson was also, according to the reporter, constantly looking over his shoulder, asked if someone was behind him, appeared, fearful and hypervigilant and all this stuff. These signs of, psychosis, paranoia, and stuff like that. Is there any training that you guys get for this stuff when you're in the academy or anywhere else, or do you recognize that, or is it just like a priest at confession? They just throw you in there and say, start hearing sins,
No, it's not like a priest at confession. No, you do. I mean, and it's come a long way from when I first started, of course, but it's still a slippery slope, right? I mean, the police are the police. The police are not psychiatrists.
Yeah, they're not trained to do that.
I mean, what a 40-hour class or an 80-hour class does not turn you into some kind of professional. Yeah, I mean, I think more than anything, you just compare it to the norm. When you talk to people, you can detect, nervous behavior or, behavior similar to Dotson's. Am I going to sit there and say, I think he's schizophrenic or he's this or he's that? No, I'm in no way, shape, or form a doctor, a psychiatrist, a PhD in psychology. I don't have any of that. Who am I to say?
So was there anything in this interview that an investigator or detective could have used?
Well, I mean,
in this case,
yeah,
used some matter to think he's crazy.
You can think that, but again, that's not law enforcement's role to
Right.
say that he is.
Right.
I mean, he admits to when he says
That he did it.
yeah, he admits to doing it. So, yeah, that's something you're going to use.
So it's clear through this interview that Dotson appeared to be what we would say unraveling psychologically,
Seemingly.
felt pursued by imagined threats, believed in some sort of spiritual war. Spiritual war comes up a lot, it seems like, in some of these cases we see. He recited loosely a self-defense story, yet he still couldn't articulate clear motives about why he did it.
One thing that I am kind of interested in, it does go back to the reporter.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's an intern, not much experience.
Right.
But I would think kind of turning the tables here a little bit. I mean, if you're either educated in journalism or you're working for a newspaper, TV, whatever the case may be, there are rules. Now, did she go in there and say, I'm a Branch Davidian member who works for the Dallas Morning News?
Yeah.
Probably not, but who knows? I mean, probably did not do that. But the things that were kind of like we talked about, so she doesn't bring any writing instrument, no pen, notepad.
Quarter.
The recorders in prison probably,
They might have it.
Well, they might have it, but I think you looked that up one time, and some of them prohibit the recording
I don't
device.
recall any of that. I always recall. I don't recall.
Or maybe I'm wrong. The Dallas Morning News is probably not saying, hey, and like unless she's just gone rogue, right? Like, hey, I'm going back to the bosses with a juicy story.
Yeah. I can't imagine that the morning news would send an intern to do this because it's a big national story. This is a page one story. I have no doubt that she was an intern at the morning news, but I sense that she might have made the request herself and was going to make a splash on this thing.
Yeah, that's what I think. I wonder if she got the job.
I don't know. Hopefully she was aware and faithful to the ethics required of a reporter in that situation. That being that she's obligated to play it straight up, tell exactly who she is.
Right.
Because then she's not much any different than Dave Bliss, to be honest with you. But I find it highly unlikely even a young person like that would construct a story that she was with a religious organization or something like that. Carlton Dotson could have believed she said that, possibly, but I doubt that she told that to the authorities at the jail, which would have taken her request.
Yeah, I'm reading the I guess this is a court transcript of sorts.
What's it say?
A reported jailhouse confession made banner headlines in Thursday's Dallas Morning News. Lavendera. Now you might wonder, how was it that an intern got this scoop? The newspaper officials say that they had sent one of their own reporters into the jail to try to get an interview with Carlton Dotson. That reporter was turned away, and the newspaper says they decided to try a different approach.
Okay, all right.
And that's why the intern was sent in.
Gotcha.
Grady Irving, who is Carlton Dotson's attorney, says he's still investigating this matter as to how this might have happened, and says he'll try to get to the bottom of it, but he hasn't gotten quite there yet.
I think ultimately the attorney, of course, is trying to keep that interview out of any court proceeding.
Did you show your identification as a reporter for the Dallas Morning News? No. Well, I did leave her a sheet of paper with a note, and my credentials were photocopied. But that was only after the interview. That was after the interview. So before the interview, you didn't show ID to anyone at the prison. Said I showed my personal identification. Okay, but not ID saying that you were with the Dallas Morning News. No. Okay, now Carlton Dotson comes into the room. You're sitting there. I know there's plexiglass or glass. And you were talking on phones, right? What was the first thing that you said to him? Well, I first identified myself to him because he had been corresponding with a staff writer that works with the, quote, Dallas Morning News. And he actually said that he was going to call him the next day, but the conversation continued after that. How did you identify yourself? She was asked. She said, quote, I'm Shani George with the Dallas Morning News. I don't know that, like I said, I don't know the rules, if you will, on journalism. Found interesting was 0 notes at all. I mean, and perhaps she didn't know, or maybe she was there already. And I don't want to say not prepared, but maybe just the ability to
Yeah, I don't know when she came into their plans, because they had a different reporter, they said, and he or she was turned away.
Yeah.
And then they tried this angle to get the intern in there to do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe she was just there, and when you would think that
It's because she was a hot girl.
could have been.
It's possible.
100%.
Yeah. Very possible.
She's a hot girl.
Yeah.
Who the hell knows? Might have been.
Well, regardless, that 20-year-old Dallas Morning News intern got the confession.
And I think ultimately that defense attorney wanted to keep him out
Yeah.
of the court record. All right, go on with yours now.
All right, so Dotson indeed was later found incompetent to stand trial, then found competent months later, suggesting fluctuating mental stability. His comments in the interview support that the theory that he was experiencing a break from reality during the killing or afterward. The case would never make it to trial, though. Dotson agreed to plead guilty in June of 2005. He was sentenced to 35 years and sent to the Connolly State Prison Unit in Kennedy, Texas, which is about 60 miles southeast of San Antonio. A year ago, in November, Dotson, then 43, was released on parole to McLennan County after about 19 years of the 35-year prison term. The news surprised many connected to the original case, including Rouse. In addition to completing treatment and standard parole conditions, Dotson, now 43, is also subject to Texas, quote, super intensive supervision program. The program is designed to, quote, minimize the threat to the community from dangerous offenders released on parole or mandatory supervision. That is according to a spokesperson for the Texas Board of Pardons and Parole. Dennehy's stepfather told ESPN that he and Dennehy's sister had opposed parole over the years, but that a year before Dotson's release, quote, we softened our stance as we think Patrick may have. They told the Texas Department of Criminal Justice that they believed Dotson should do all of the sentence time, but that they would let the parole board make its own decision. Dotson has declined all media interview requests. Dennehy's stepfather, Brian Brabison, said Dotson is living in Houston, although he has bounced all around Texas, including a stint in Waco since getting out. The stepfather said he would like to speak to Dotson. Quote, I haven't reached out to him, but when we were looking for Patrick in 2003, I spoke to Dotson on the phone and I asked what happened. He told me if we could meet in person, he would tell me. I'm still waiting for that explanation, end quote. For Rouse, news of the parole brought it all back. He told ESPN that he thought obviously of Patrick and Patrick's family. I thought about Pat's mom, his sister, his stepdad, and how hurt they're going to be. Rouse also said, quote, I also believe in rehabilitation, though. You can't work in prison if you don't believe in rehabilitation. Is Dotson rehabilitated? Is he ready to function? Did he get what he needed inside to be able to function?
So our friend Abar, he is our friend, works in corrections. He's in California. In 2003, he was in a pretty precarious situation. A father of one of the Baylor players who had criticized Abar for being disloyal to Bliss said, I owe him an apology because I think he did the right thing at the right time. And I don't care what any coach says anywhere. I think that they should weed out the bad coaches. And if it takes something like this, that's what it takes. Rouse's decision, of course, to do the right thing came at a cost to him professionally. Like Bliss, Abar's career as a basketball coach was over. And why was it over? For violating the unwritten rule of loyalty among coaches. Abar's boss at another school said at the time that this could go, quote, one of two ways. People who don't know the story that well may think, who wants to hire this guy who tapes the coach? Is he going to turn us in for every little thing? But when you look at it another way, you realize you have to take care of yourself when you're dealing with the law. And when you start talking about smearing a young man's name, you can definitely see how he was put in a corner. By taping Bliss and making the information available to Baylor and the NCAA, Rouse violated, quote unquote, the code. The tenet of the coaching profession that says coaches do not turn in other coaches. Said one attorney of a firm that specializes in helping schools deal with the NCAA. He spoke to the Star-Telegram in those days. Quote, "It's an old story. If Coach A tells on Coach B, Coach A will be ostracized in the coaching community, period." Ironically, the most telling example of the code occurred at Baylor in the 1995 case. Those 3 assistant coaches refused to implicate Daryl Johnson until they were questioned by Baylor attorneys after the trial. The ultimate act of protecting the head coach. That same attorney said if you asked them, they would tell you, well, in our profession, that's the way it is. You protect, you protect, you protect. And that, of course, is certainly why Dave Bliss thought he could tell his coaches all this stuff and get away with it. Jeff Ray was the head basketball coach and athletic director at Midwestern State when Rouse was there. He said at the time that he expected Rouse to face some difficulty finding another coaching job. He said, if you're asking me, will this hurt him in our profession as far as maybe getting a future job, it probably will, Ray said. I think the more he found out, Ray said, the more uneasy he felt about the situation. Another former boss and coach said he advised Rouse to be forthcoming, especially law enforcement. Quote, "I told Abar, be loyal to Coach Bliss and Baylor, but if it ever gets to a situation where you're talking to police, be loyal to yourself." Both of those coaches, oddly enough, I found funny, said they had no knowledge of the taping, showing they were going to protect themselves too while this was going on. Ray said, "I would never ask an assistant to do anything I wouldn't be willing to do. And I would sure never ask one to lie. Some things are bigger than your job, and your integrity is one of them." Abar at the time thought that he would get a chance, at least at the junior college or lower NCAA division schools. But he instead decided to just simply move on. When I met Abar Rouse, he was a teacher. He was just about to get a job as a teacher at the Federal Medical Center at Carswell in Fort Worth. He had been promoted twice and was about to put his degree in education at Baylor to use as a teacher there. At the time, he is also sharing his experiences as a public speaker, addressing audiences on the subject of professional ethics. So Abar Rouse today is 49 years old, late 40s, maybe 50. He's a married father of 4 and grandfather of 7. He lives in Victorville, California, where he works as an assistant warden at one of the 3 federal facilities there. He serves with people of integrity, he said, and working for an agency of integrity. He serves with quote-unquote pride and, quote, "I don't know if that would necessarily be true if I were in college basketball still." As it concerns Bliss, Abar told me years ago that he does not hold any ill will toward him. It took a while for him to actually even watch college basketball again. He said, "I've moved on with my life, and I'm happy. If none of that had happened, I wouldn't have had my family. And God has a purpose for all of us and a reason, and I'm in a better place." And that concludes the case, murder at Baylor in 2003.
This is a Stolen Water Media production.